Annunciation Radio, WNOC Bowling Green, Toledo, WHRQ Sandusky, WRRO Eden Bryan, WFOT Lexington Mansfield, and WSHB Willard.
Welcome to Annunciation Radio's Faith with Reasons, the program that examines what the church teaches and why. Faith with Reasons.
Well, welcome aboard. Glad you could join us for this 518th episode of Faith with Reasons. Ron Finn along with Shayne Stanfield here in the nice cozy studios of Annunciation Radio inside the Camelot Salon. There's our Camelot studio. So we're happy to be here. Happy Advent, one and all. And of course, just a beautiful day if you don't mind the cold.
That's right. I do believe it's starting to snow.
It's a little chilly out there, and it's going to get really cold tonight. So, of course, those that are hearing this for the Saturday Encore, it will have warmed up by then.
Yeah, I'll go to bottom out and then warm
what
back
are we
up.
going to do?
Yeah.
The other thing that if you're listening to this on the Saturday Encore, of course, we're live now on Wednesday afternoon. But tomorrow morning, that would be Thursday morning, we're going to be broadcasting live at the Pinnacle for the Catholic Business Network breakfast and Christmas party that's taking place there. Dave Vacherus, the guest speaker, and a choir of 8 or 9 from St. John's Jesuit to kind of really get us in the holiday spirit.
Very cool. Yeah. Looking forward to that.
Yeah. So what's new with you, Shayne?
Not much. I'm just trying to...
You've got nothing to do with your time now. You spent all that time working on the house,
Yeah.
and that's all done now.
Well,
and then it's like you're probably wandering around the house going, what can I do? You're doing laundry and stuff.
Still little things here and there.
Yeah.
It's that honey-do list of, do some touch of painting, and, there's a garage that needs to be cleaned and painted, and, yeah, there's all sorts of stuff.
Never ends when you have a house.
That's right. That's right. Now I got all the time to do it, so...
That's right. So decorating the house for Christmas, you put any lights on it or anything?
Not yet.
Oh, but you will.
We are the holdout. We go at the last
Good.
last minute, and it's just a time to enjoy Advent. I guess I could look at look at all the neighbors and look at their lights, and I think I'm already immersed in it anyhow. So.
Well, see, it sometimes ends when you have a house. It never ends when you have a house with a wife.
Yeah.
Then it never ends.
Yeah.
That's very true. Yeah, the familiar voice you just heard, no, we didn't slip in a quick edition of Bible Basics on you. He's actually in studio with us live right now. Professor Peter Sibilio is in studio. Hi.
Hey, I was looking at, we should do a book. I have this huge notebook full of notes on Christmas in the Bible going all the way back to 2017.
Really?
Wow.
Yes.
Wow.
I think we're getting up there with Bing Crosby and
That's right.
and stuff like that.
We'll make this an hour version of Bible Basics.
So-
Let's get
Yeah,
started.
there you go. I like that, yeah. And so what's new with you, Peter?
Oh, the end of the semester, the end of the year, trying to get new syllabi done. But you know what? The Greek students are still coming. And in fact, they're even saying, let's meet next week. And I'm like, well,
Nice.
exams are over. But they still want to meet. And so that's been a great success.
I've been really enjoying it.
And in part, thanks to Annunciation Radio, because we talked about it here. And I think we're just going to start over right from the beginning in the fall. So we'll finish up with Greek 2 in the spring. And then next fall, hopefully I can come back and say, anybody who wants a very rare course where you learn both classical and New Testament Greek, it's free if you do your homework.
Nice.
Now, if people wanted to get involved in that,
Yes.
can they email you or something?
Absolutely. They can email me. They can just come up to Lourdes and say, where is that strange person who talks to himself? And I'm like, I'm not talking to myself. I'm repeating those Greek paradigms,
Might get you out there jogging sometime, too. I still see you. I don't honk, though, because I don't want to startle you.
Yeah.
But I do see you on occasion running through the neighborhood. So.
Do you see the bill collector behind me?
No.
Okay.
There goes
Don't
Peter.
mention where the studio
He's
is.
running through the neighborhood, and this time he's got a television under his arm.
That's right. I'm not the guy you want to see with a sack on your roof. That's for sure.
There you go. Well, I was looking back, and it's been like 3 months since you've been on. So you tend to come on at the change of season, so we're going to call you a man for all seasons.
That's true. I can mess up whatever time of year it is.
There you go. You set it all straight for us, and that's what we appreciate about it. Now, last time you were here, I would almost
I was
call
a
it,
downer. I was
would
a
call it a
total
cliffhanger
downer.
because we had an active conversation going, and you had some wonderful stuff, and then the music hit, and we realized the hour is over.
Yeah, we ran out of time.
I know.
Anything you want to clean up from last time?
You might say we did have a sort of sweet ending because we moved on to cookies, and I have cookies today, so
Yes,
we can
they're
talk about the
delicious.
cookies.
We had bread last time.
We did.
Yes.
We had bread, and but last time we did some of those passages in the Bible that you almost wish weren't there.
Yeah, the ones that were kind of difficult to understand, and why is this so dark? And
Very dark. And really what I wanted to say is there's just a few wonderful, we know there's consolation, Emmanuel, God with us, but then you get 2 Peter where it says, yes, your redemption is underway, but a moment is like a millennium, and a millennium is like a moment, and we're just worrying and wondering, especially when we're in pain. Like even the scientists will say, when we're hurting, a moment really is like 1,000 years. And how long is this going to go on? But then you get John 20, where Jesus looks at Thomas and said, hey, I'm glad you came to faith, but blessed is everybody else after you who believes in me and doesn't get to do what you did. And it's almost like that one scene from The Chosen. The words aren't in the Bible, but there's this one scene where Jesus casts a demon out of a man and then just hugs the man and says, it's been so long. I know. And you think, Jesus gets it.
Yeah.
He understands us in all of this darkness and all of these dark times. He not only comes to save us and will save us, but until that is complete, right, he gets it. He gets us. And so Advent is Jesus' coming, but it also celebrates Jesus' coming again. And in between, Jesus just gets us.
Awesome.
Yeah.
So you wanted to going back to the last time you were here, you wanted to end on a better note, I guess.
I hope that's good enough.
Yeah.
It's a nice
so
segue.
I feel better.
Yeah, absolutely. No, I mean,
It's
absolutely.
what do they say? Or Sagi if you're from Indiana. No, segue. I think that.
Oh, my.
No, but I mean, I think that is a very, very positive thing because we know that we're here to suffer. We're going to suffer. No matter how you look at it, you can't get around it.
You can't. I mean, if you think anyone out there who has never suffered, raise your hand. I don't see any hands, but I'm betting that, if you think about it, it's the one thing we all have in common from the moment of our conception is pain. But there's nothing more than that without God. And God is everything more than that, even when he comes to take up our pain so that it'll end. And until then, he's with us and he gets us like nobody else.
Well, like the recent readings, my burden is light, my yoke is not heavy.
That's true.
It's an easy yoke. And you look at that and you go, well, wait a minute, there's a lot of pain here. What do you mean your burden is light? Or your yoke is light?
Absolutely.
But he always, being in union with him, the carrying becomes much easier, and it becomes filled with purpose.
Absolutely. See,
And
that
there's something
is
to
the
come
difference.
through on the other side of it.
That is the difference between everyone who suffers and people who can understand a sense of purpose and offering it up. Like you said, I got news for you. You're going to suffer. Do you want the suffering to count for something? Do you want it to mean something? Do you want your tears to matter? Right? Well, because of Jesus, they can.
Yeah. Redemptive suffering. Yeah, absolutely. So is there I just lost my train of thought.
Well, that's okay.
That'll happen.
It's radio. I'm certainly not the radio professional.
We
so
could go with egg yolks and
Yeah.
talk about cookies.
we could
Or
definitely
I
do
could
that.
remind everybody that Professor Peter Sibilio is in studio with us today. Of course, you hear him on Bible Basics. You also hear him on the Faith Alive program with
Yes.
Catholic Charities with Social Justice. And, of course, he's the director of MA, that'd be the master's program, right, at Assistant Professor of Theological Studies, too, at Lourdes University. And, there is so much to learn, and people are signing up, and I don't know when you start your next master's class. You gather up the cohort, so to speak, and when you have enough students, then you launch
That's
right?
We're probably going to do something, I hope, maybe next year with our education program and the diocese. In other words, see exactly what the diocese needs from master's level candidates, probably for teaching purposes, I think, because, not everybody is crazy enough to get a PhD, and you probably don't need it for high schools and grade schools, but boy, do we need good theology teachers in those schools.
And I'm thinking about the many men in the diaconate program that could really benefit from something like that.
Absolutely.
And it would fit their personality and kind of they're on the path anyway, and this would be another way to enhance that experience. That
was one of the things that when we had cohorts that folks in that really enjoyed that opportunity. And we needed some of the current deacons to come back and say, I wish I had done this, because if you think you're busy now, wait until you have not just 2 jobs and your studies, but 2 jobs and 3 churches and 1 family. Right. And so if you can do the diaconate program along with any type of master's degree, right, and you can do them at the same time, right, that's really the time to do it, because what we kind of heard from the deacons is, I wish I'd done it when I was in formation, and as soon as I retire, I'll think about it. Oh, yeah. Because in between, wow, are the deacons pushed?
That's for sure.
And stretched. But just wonderful. I mean, just in many ways, just life to our diocese.
Mm-hmm. All right, let's talk about Advent. So Advent, 3 purple candles and 1 rose candle.
Yes.
Right.
Gaudete Sunday.
I love Gaudete Sunday. Mm-hmm. I mean, it's a penitential season.
Yes, it is.
It's an anticipatory season, but there's joy in the midst of it.
In the midst of it. And that was one of the things that differentiated Advent from Lent, is that you have this sense of anticipation. In these 2 seasons of preparation, there's definitely more of a sense of intentional hopefulness. And so even as the calendar was forming, right, you have this sense of preparing for the Lord's birth, always with a sense, yes, of we should be fasting. Okay, there are other things that we should be doing, but also this sense of anticipation. Christ's coming, and then Christ's coming again, right? We kind of we celebrate both in Advent, and then we find ourselves, well, what am I doing in between? Because that's right where I am now.
It's kind of hard to discuss fasting when you got a plate of cookies behind you.
Well, that's true. I fasted for 2 days so I could eat them. So, I don't think that's what they mean by the diet thing, like have fiber and diet Pepsi or something like that.
Plus, the feast always follows the fast.
Yeah, that's true.
Yeah, absolutely.
That's true. And I bet if you are married, you can't just have a fiber and diet Pepsi. I bet that wouldn't go over
probably not well. So since we were talking about it, the significance of Gaudete Sunday.
Yes.
I mean, it's not pink, it's rose. Mm-hmm. So a lot of priests will correct you on that. They'll insist they don't wear pink.
No.
they wear rose. So we're coming up on that.
Yes.
It's the third
I
Sunday.
I cannot believe that we're coming up on that.
Mm-hmm.
I mean,
it's gone by, hasn't it?
It seems like Thanksgiving there should have been like a week that wasn't there.
Yeah.
And we should be maybe just coming up to the 2nd week of Advent and wondering, well, when is the Immaculate Conception this year? Do I have to go to church if it's on this? Oh, wait, it's a Sunday. It seems like we should just be doing that, and that's already behind us now.
Mm-hmm.
What was it like? It's like a week. Christmas is like a week and a half away, I think. It's just
yeah, we're getting very close.
Very close.
Anyway, I interrupted your joy.
It's all right. So it's a period of joy.
Yes.
So we're celebrating joy in the midst of Advent. It's one break here, and again, that's coming up this Sunday. So the significance of this for those that don't know.
Well, there was always this sense again of we have to prepare, but it's not quite like Lent, because Advent takes a little longer to form, 500s, 600s, and then it's completely defined with the Second Vatican Council. But it was decided that there has to be a penitential part of Advent, but there also has to be this sense of joy. And so that's where you get this idea that at least one of the Sundays has to be called Gaudete, where we're actually given the Latin imperative to celebrate. And so in part, this idea of differentiating Advent from Lent with this Gaudete Sunday, a Sunday specifically in a week specifically for joy, is kind of where that develops.
And it can't necessarily be in the middle because obviously
Right.
there's only 4 weeks.
Absolutely.
So it's either the second or the third.
That's right.
But the significance is at least as far as where it's at is the idea was to kind of put it more toward the
the
center.
actual nativity.
Yeah,
That's
yeah,
right.
Yeah.
Now, Gaudete, that would be, I should have turned your mic off for that. But anyway, meaning joy. Mm-hmm. What about the term Advent? Where did that come from? What's the origin of that word?
Well, it's obviously a Western term, and we start to hear about it at the right around 200. And just as the church is settling on December 25th as the date of the Nativity, you also get reflections on, well, how do we prepare for that? And so you will have different councils meet. Once you have December 25th as forevermore the Nativity, at least in the West, and the East does keep that. Constantine in 336 says it's December 25th. And not long after that, by the 500s, you have reflections in conferences on, well, how do we prepare for that? And so St. Martin of Tours is very, very influential. And we start to see sacramentaries soon after that will specifically define weeks before the Nativity that are used for preparation. And in the West, that's where you get the term Advent, a coming to something. Okay, it's both Christ coming to earth and Christ coming back to earth. There's always that sense of balance, right? We're not just preparing for Christ's birth, but also for his return. And so that coming to, or Advent, is the Latin term that's used in the West again and again in these sacramentaries and by St. Martin of Tours, and it sticks.
So you mentioned that Constantine in 336 established or settled the
Yes.
date as December 25th. How much debate prior to that was taking place, or was there fluctuation? I mean, he had to decide something. What was the purpose
Yes.
of that?
Well, it's funny because we have nothing about Christ's physical birth from our earliest Christian writer, St. Paul. He simply talks about Christ's Last Supper, his last day, his death, resurrection, and return. So he gives us half of the Advent heavy. Mm-hmm. Okay. When we have capital G gospel writers, Matthew and Luke will talk about the Nativity. And then you have to sort of wait. By the way, folks, they're not top secret. They don't destroy the other Gospels. But these later reflections on Christ's birth, the infancy Gospel of Thomas, the Proto-Evangelium of James, the Gospel of the infancy of Jesus, the Nativity Gospel of Matthew, these later church reflections on Jesus's birth, you start to see, people are looking at his life now. Mm-hmm. And from that batch of material that represents reflection on Jesus's life, you start to get more and more of a debate over, well, when should we celebrate it, right? Easter is always going to be front and center foremost. But in order, and in part, to ensure right teaching, that Jesus is fully God and fully human, setting a date for his physical birth becomes more and more important. And so it's really around the 200s that you start to get debate about a date, and then it's finally settled in 336 with December 25th. You do have Christian authors. Some say, well, it should be April 25th. Others say December 25th. And kind of reflecting on the Gospels, thinking about, well, what are these clues that they put in there? Could we make it December 25th? Okay. Plus, you have the whole symbolism of light coming into the world, right, at the darkest time. So it is not in any way that Constantine wants to sort of sell Christianity. Not at all. But just this idea that Christians are doing what Christians have done and what Jews have done, and look at the outside world and say, you know what, you're getting a few things right. Just with reason and looking at the seasons, but we have something much greater for you than celebrating the days getting longer. We're going to tell you about the true light coming into the world. And so that's how Constantine settles on December 25th. And then we backdate this time of preparation over the next 200 years to get Advent.
So speaking of backdating, church doctrine set the date of Christmas.
Yes.
Was that set before the solemnity of the Annunciation?
Right around the same time, because what they'll do
they have
once
to connect, right?
once you have the 25th set, then you go back and you say, well, 9 months earlier, again, partly because of church teaching insisting on the full humanity and full divinity of Jesus together. And so if you sort of attack Christmas, if you attack the Annunciation, there should be a radio station named after that, right? A lot of times that was used.
Which started on the Feast of the Assumption.
There you go.
Okay.
It was used by heretics as a sort of backdoor way into saying Jesus was fully God but not fully human, or fully human but not fully God. And so, we say, well, we kind of have worked through these historical puzzles, but it's very important for right theological teaching too.
So you might have somebody scratching their head and saying, well, obviously Jesus being Jesus, you would think that someone would have passed down, or it would have been known, his actual birthday. And yet it probably wasn't, or was, that big of a deal back then as it is today.
People would look at the day of their birth kind of as a sort of marker of destiny if things are going wrong, right? You hear Job say, oh, the day of my birth, boy, what a terrible day, right? But you didn't regularly necessarily celebrate it every single year. We hear about Pharaoh having a party for his birthday, something remembered by Jewish people, but the focus for Jesus is he's risen from the dead. And so we look back at his life. It's almost as if the Gospels develop backwards in that sense. And so they have to do some digging on Christmas. And thank goodness Matthew and Luke, especially Luke, says, I looked into all this, right? He's the first one who says, I did the research on this, right? And you can tell he doesn't give us a set day, but the intros, not his sort of personal intro in Luke 1:1-4, but right after that in chapter 1, in chapter 2, in chapter 3, it's as if he's giving you bylines at the bottom, like when you see a military movie, like whatever Top Gun they're on, it's like, somewhere in the Persian Gulf.
Right.
Oh, yeah. Right. First 3 chapters, Luke does that at the beginning of each of his chapters. When Quirinius was governor of Syria and Augustus called for a census, or during the tetrarchy of Licinius of Abilene, right, in beginning of chapter 3. So he really does want to cement both Christ's life and his birth right in human plans and human history. That's how God works out God's plans for all of us.
So obviously the focus is there for Christ's death and resurrection, and that was known from day one. So there was no emphasis really of the culture of that time to celebrate. I mean, you mentioned Pharaoh, right? That would have parties. Was it or was it not a Jewish custom to?
It doesn't seem to be a day of annual celebration, but a time of reflection.
Okay.
Okay, looking back to look forward. Okay. For others, it certainly could be, but again, for them, they have so many. They don't mind massive contradictions in stories about their gods. And so it would be tough to say, well, when was Zeus born? Right? Because they have so many different stories.
At least to say of culturally and of the time period, it's not like it's remembered or recorded, obviously, today.
No.
It's just something that, somebody could go through life and they would have just a general time of when they were born, and maybe they only cared about their age, but they didn't care about the day.
Clement of Alexandria, Sextus Africanus, and then Hippolytus of Rome are kind of the big early names with sort of saying, well, let's look at the Gospels and let's even consult these other church writings, though they're not gospel, and see if we can come up with a date. And so Constantine does not do this willy-nilly, right? He's able to ask the bishops and see what they're saying, and they can draw on an ongoing debate to give Constantine some notes.
Very good.
And really sort of sanctify so many international and pagan celebrations this time of year. Okay, it's in no way that the bishops sort of steal those. But again, there's this sense of, do you know that we use evergreens as a symbol of Mary? Do you know that we have a star? Do you know that we talk about the light coming into the world?
And I like the way you put that too, sanctifying.
Yes.
Yeah.
Right. It's in no way a sort of, Clement of Alexandria doesn't care at all about, right. But there's this ongoing sense that Jews bequeath to Christians of God sanctifying the secular. And so the secular world may be doing certain things that aren't necessarily off, but they only understand the tiniest little bit.
Yeah.
And through the scriptures and traditions of the church, there's so much more. The doors of the church open, and you can see the full meaning of the season.
Well, if you're trying to build bridges, too.
That's true.
Obviously, you want to say what you're doing here is not entirely wrong.
Right, exactly.
You've got this part right. Now, again, you're going to sanctify this.
Yep.
Yeah, very cool.
I do want to talk a little bit about finding Advent in the Bible. I know we have Isaiah, and we have the John the Baptist. But in terms of, I guess, finding actual scriptural passages that kind of lead us to Advent, I'm sure there are many. And I know we're coming up on break here pretty soon, but anything off the top of your head that we should look at?
Well, you have so many prophecies that will talk about what's happening in the Advent season and in the Nativity season, that, of course, we can always talk about. Mary's Magnificat. Well, she obviously knew and understood Hannah's prayer. And part of that is the prayer on her own lips. Okay. Not to mention Isaiah and the virgin shall conceive, right? The Jewish prophecy long before Jesus.
Yeah.
And then Luke kind of gives us the journey to Bethlehem.
Great. We'll dig in deeper, as we always do, with Professor Peter Sibilio, who is in studio with us now as our guest on Faith with Reasons. We are going to take a little bit of a break. Shayne and I are going to indulge in some Christmas cookies that Peter brought. You can share some if you're here in 12 seconds or so.
Are you or someone you know hurting from a past abortion? Contact Project Rachel for confidential help in starting your healing journey. Please call 419-260-5811 or visit hopeafterabortion.org. God's mercy is abundant and waiting for you. Project Rachel is here to offer confidential help on your journey to healing.
Critics often accuse Christians of being intolerant for saying a person's belief is wrong, the underlying assumption being that a tolerant worldview accepts everyone's opinions as having equal value. What can we say in response? Well, first, the objection wrongly assumes that tolerance means accepting everyone's opinions as having equal value. The true meaning of tolerance is respecting a person's dignity even though you think he's wrong. We're labeled as intolerant for saying someone is wrong, but yet saying someone is wrong belongs to the essence of tolerance. Second, the charge applies a double standard. The objector says the Christian is being intolerant for saying someone's belief is wrong, but yet in doing so, the objector necessarily implies the Christian's belief is wrong. and thus as being intolerant according to his own standards. So the charge from intolerant is simply confused and inconsistent. I'm Carlo Broussard with the ready reason for Catholic Answers, Catholic.com.
Courage, an apostolate of the Catholic Church, ministers to persons with same-sex attractions and their loved ones. They also have an outreach called Encourage, which ministers to relatives, spouses, and friends of persons with same-sex attractions. Endorsed by the Pontifical Council for the Family, our beloved John Paul II said of this ministry, "Courage is doing the work of God." Please visit the Courage website, couragerc.org, to learn more and find a Courage chapter near you.
Now, back to Faith with Reasons here on Annunciation Radio.
Hey, welcome back here. Shayne Stanfield with Ron Finn, and today we're blessed to have Peter Sibilio, Dr. Peter Sibilio, in the studio with us today. He's the Director of MA in Theology, Assistant Professor of Theological Studies at Lourdes University, and host of the daily series heard here on Annunciation Radio entitled Bible Basics. He also contributes to social justice in the Bible, and that's on the Catholic Charities Annunciation Radio weekly program, Faith Alive. As a Bible teacher at Lourdes University, you lead students to a deeper understanding of Scriptures. So that's what we're actually here to learn more about the Scriptures. You had a fantastic discussion.
Your students.
Well, I'm glad you didn't look at the final exams. You would think where's he leading these people?
So we just concluded the last half hour with getting into this. We're hearing it already. Obviously,
yes.
Daily. We're these readings from Isaiah that's describing, and of course, Ron mentioned earlier too. Even John the Baptist. I mean, they're constantly proclaiming Christ's coming, and the significance of a lot of what was talked about centuries before,
yes.
Christ's coming, actually were being proclaimed in a very detailed way.
Absolutely. You find Mark will use Malachi and Isaiah. Matthew and Luke in particular seem to love Isaiah in this time of preparation. But it's one of the reasons why our Bibles are put together the way they are. If you go to your synagogue, you'll see the Bible ending with 2 Chronicles. And you say, well, that's not the last book in our Old Testament. I wonder if it's a Greek thing. But then you pick up the Septuagint and you see Daniel toward the end, but not Malachi. And you're like, well, how does Malachi get to be the end of what Christians will come to call the Old Testament? And it's because Malachi ends with this prediction of something big is about to happen, and there'll be a forerunner who announces it.
Oh.
And so Matthew can jump in with, here's a genealogy of Jesus, and here is that Malachi-like forerunner, John the Baptist, saying, it's here. It's the old is over, and the new is here, and there he is. And so in part, that's kind of why we get this sort of gap. Okay, the infancy gospel of Thomas will sort of reflect and try and fill in. But that's why our first gospel in the New Testament, Matthew, will go from a genealogy and a quick birth story to all of a sudden John the Baptist. Right? Because, well, Mark already talked about this, and it really is this perfect link to all that's come before it. Let's end with Malachi, because that's a perfect runway for John and Jesus.
Beautiful. Now, I mentioned previously Isaiah. How many centuries?
Another trick question. It seems that Isaiah was so powerful that students of his sort of continue on in his name. And so some chapters in Isaiah will probably be after Isaiah is dead. You no longer hear Isaiah doing anything after chapter 39, but the sense of God renewing God's promise and trusting in God, those themes seem to be recycled again and again and again for Judaism as it advances. And so it seems like chapter 40 to chapter 66, the end of the book, are poems and songs that Isaiah's students and followers will sing about how right he was, and this world is so much bigger than we ever knew. But this idea of God guiding us, that is something we always trust in, no matter if we're tiny and Babylon destroys us or Persia lets us go back. It's always our great God who is doing more and more and more. And so they will look to the future, as Isaiah did. And of course, that just opens the door for Jesus himself and his first followers to say, see how God keeps filling God's promises. Yeah. He fulfilled it before. And this second time around, it's going to be even bigger than you could imagine. And so we read Isaiah, especially chapters 40 through 55, or 54 and 55, so much both at Advent and again at Lent, right? Because that's where we hear about the suffering servant who takes our transgressions on us. And Isaiah 45, you get this amazing thing, Cyrus the Persian can be Messiah. That's fine. They can have the political dynasty if they want it for now. I'm doing something so much greater than you could imagine.
Oh, fantastic.
And so we see Isaiah both at Advent and at Lent.
Wow, that's great.
Yeah.
Now, we're just mere days away from beginning O antiphons.
You know, I was saving that for the end because you always give me a reading list. You give me a reading list, and those are always on there, and so they will be coming up. That's on the list of things we should be reading.
Okay, you want me to save that for later? Or?
Sure, I mean, we could do them now, but definitely. Where do you find them? Like, I know where to find them, but like when you want to see what the O antiphons are, suppose I don't get to Mass that day.
Well, I know you can certainly look them up online.
That's all you have to do.
Yeah, that's all I had to do, and it'll tell you where it's sourced, right?
Yes, absolutely.
And they're all in the Psalms?
Yes, as far as I know.
But they're not chronological all in the Psalms, are they?
I want to say one is from Isaiah, but most are from the Psalms because they're songs, right? That call and response thing. And they are just the days before Christmas. And they're just, even if we don't sing them, okay, even if we just sort of meditate on them, sort of appreciate their poetry, they just sort of snap us back into the reason for the season.
Is this why the church waits until the 17th?
Yes. Yes, so that you have a whole week of this reminder. Gaudete Sunday has passed, but right, it's kind of in the final stretch for the beginning of really not just a one-day feast, right, but an ongoing feast because we have so many things after Christmas as well. Holy Family, coronation, presentation in the temple, 40-day Epiphany.
Which is just the opposite of what the world is doing right now.
Oh,
everybody's been celebrating Christmas since before Thanksgiving.
Everybody's depressed by like 2:00 on Christmas afternoon because we've stuffed ourselves with eggnog and cookies and there's wrapping paper all over.
And it's time to take the tree down and Christmas is over with, right? No, I mean it's just begun.
That's true.
And we've got all of this and I'm glad you brought that up because it's. It's something that we just need to keep reminding our listeners and anybody.
Right. When did we start celebrating Christmas? I mean, Christmas in July used to be, let's be cute. It's 6 months away. But it seems like that's when we start now.
Yeah.
I mean, it seems like, hey, got to get the tree. It's July.
I just told Christy was not too long ago, but it was prior to Thanksgiving, and I walked into a store and I said I had to leave because the Christmas music was playing.
I know.
I couldn't stand it. It was like,
I did do some digging for this show, and I did find one place where Christmas actually comes before Thanksgiving.
Wow.
The dictionary. That's a hump day humor. That's one of my submissions.
I like that. I have to find a little accoutrement for that, I think. Yeah, there you go.
It's clean, right? You can repeat that joke. I have a couple more, but we'll save those for the end.
Oh boy, yeah, you got to keep the little handy.
Right.
Yes,
that's right. Got to have it handy. Whenever Peter's in studio, we have to have.
That's right. That's right. But no, I mean, it's just and here we've been discussing, this preparation for Christmas, and that's really what we're supposed to be doing right now. I mean, this is just a very special time.
I have an idea. If we're going to start celebrating for Christmas in July, well, then shouldn't we be extending our reading for Christmas? In addition to what we're doing, we should start studying in July.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
It's like all music and sales and Amazon Day, whatever,
Yes.
But why aren't we doing a little more studying for Christmas? Why aren't we
60th
reading
day of
Matthew's
Christmas,
gospel? Yeah, exactly. I mean, would it kill you to read Luke's gospel? I don't think so. Some people, I forget who it was, but it kind of playing off the idea of the greatest story ever told. I forget who the author was, who with great admiration for Luke Acts said together, he thought it was the most beautiful story ever told. Just all the bookends that connect Luke to Acts, where, you sort of start out with this weaving together of God's history and human history, this far off land affected by Caesar and Rome, and then by the end of Acts, Paul is in Rome talking about a different sort of Savior.
Yeah.
And just the way Luke puts all of that weaving together right in human time and space.
It's amazing.
Yes.
I mean, so you bring up an interesting point, because I think that there's so much. I guess what you can compare that, really what's going on even today, the worldview, and what you see as success that continues to happen with the church.
Oh, absolutely.
I mean, it's very relatable, I guess.
Oh, for sure. I know as wonderful. I sometimes will make fun of a few who don't read, but the students at Lourdes are just a cut above. I mean, the first thing they do off the bus is a service project and go to places like Helping Hands of St. Louis. As far as I know, no other school does that first thing. Other schools do that. Lourdes students do that even before they're in the classroom. Wow. And so that is just great. But you know what? I don't know if we could let Jesus give the commencement address when they have those student loan debts and they've been going on internships and interviews, and Jesus leads with, "Blessed are you poor." Make sure your career goal is to stay that way.
Yeah,
That's right.
And that's Jesus and Luke. And so it really is, even those of us, who try to follow Christ, we always have to remember how hard it is, right? We talked at the beginning of the show about how Jesus comforts us when we're afflicted, but he's always there to afflict us when we're a little too comfortable.
Oh, yeah. No, absolutely. Yeah,
Quite a
absolutely.
blessing.
Now, we had Matt.
It's kind of like the bathroom scale where you can't reset the numbers.
Oh, yeah.
How do you calibrate this thing?
But we had Matt Archibald on the show last week, and we spent a good amount of time talking about how we were amazed of the number of prominent figures that seem to be a little more interested in their faith, or they're converting to Catholicism, or
I know.
And so this
our
goes
vice
to
president, right? Coming in,
Yeah.
Right.
J.D. Vance.
Yeah,
So.
yeah. I mean, this harkens back what you said about Paul being in Rome, because there's a shift going on. As the shift that was taking place back then, it's continuing today.
It absolutely is. It absolutely is. And just like you were saying, few people have a sense of purpose the way Paul did. He never talked specifically about when Jesus was born, but that purpose-driven life that Jesus had, that Paul had it. You cannot prove scientifically from what he says, that Jesus is risen from the dead, but he banks his whole life on it. He says, this had to be real. Look at the way I was before. Look at the way I am now.
Yeah.
Right? Jesus is the difference in between. And it's
Absolutely.
that way with all of the apostles.
Yeah.
Right? Who probably, right, you think, well, maybe Mary might have been a source for some gospel material, because she would probably be the only one who knows. If we think that Joseph had passed on, who else was there at Jesus' birth?
Right.
Don't say the little kid beating on the drums, right? Right? We always get that.
Oh, yeah.
The Christmas nativity, right? The Christmas Eve, right? They got the drummer boy there, and I had no talent, so I had to play third owl.
Not even first owl.
Not even first owl.
Great. Peter Sibilio, our guest here on Faith with Reasons. He's the Bible teacher at Lourdes University. And we'd love to have him on to talk about, the Old Testament and the New Testament, how they tie together. And, of course, we see this throughout the infancy narratives.
Yes, absolutely.
And the Christmas season and everything. So as we go through Advent here, of course, there are many aids that we have to help us
absolutely, yes,
dig
we
in
do.
a little bit. But we've always got an aid with us with our Bibles.
Absolutely.
Just knowing where to look and how to tie these old and new readings together.
And just a little bit of knowledge can actually be a fun thing. We do not use page numbers in the Bible, right? We use book title, chapter, verse. You can't say, well, turn to your Bible, page 1062, right? You'd be amazed at how many people want to do that.
Yeah.
But right where the New Testament starts, you think, oh, no. I thought once I made it out of the Old Testament, I was done with genealogy. And genealogy has nothing to do with a lady in a lamp. One of my students was like, is this the study of genies then? Did they have genies back then? But Matthew's genealogy is really fun because if you've read any of the Old Testament, you kind of see like the big names back on parade.
No.
And the women are really fun in that genealogy. When you read Matthew's genealogy, like look at the women and they all come with amazing, sometimes saucy stories. And this sort of reinterpretation of what by Jesus' time can be called Jewish history, of Abraham to kingdom, kingdom to exile, exile to something brand new. All of it coming back in the person of Jesus. And so that genealogy is anything but boring when you actually look at those names. The church is right. It's a great review of the Old Testament. And in the Old Testament, genealogy is theology because God doesn't just work with individuals. God works with whole families, whole groups of people, whole nations. And so Matthew starts that way. But man, go over some of those names. It's fun.
Oh,
I'm glad you said that because the tendency when you get to the genealogy is to
they're
skip
afraid,
over it, right?
It's like they skip over two things in church always. The thing about wives obey your husbands.
Yeah, which I've never understood.
And
that.
Genealogy, we're going to skip over that. You got to do, that wonderful program from Father Mike, Bible in 2.5 years.
Yeah.
Because he does not skip the genealogy. So I don't think we're almost done with it. I don't think we've gotten to Matthew with Matthew's genealogy. But boy, there have been plenty. But for them, that's their way of seeing how God continues to work with these people. Right? It's not just, a DNA sort of boring names we don't understand, but it's a review of a family and how God is working through the family for the whole world.
Wonderful. Now, if you're considering the entirety of the Old Testament, and you're looking at this journey of Israel. For one to look at this, you're also, I'm talking about the genealogy, of course, and for Matthew to begin with this, it's to be tying that progression from Israel into there's a purpose there for not only that, but also the prophecies.
Yes, absolutely, because around AD 150, 160, 170, really all the way up until Nicaea and then the end of the 300s, right, where the church is debating the order of books. 150, one of the heresies is we have to get rid of all the Jewish scriptures, right? Just got to get rid of them. Okay. And of course, right, they You don't want to say they're down the hall. Heresy. You see, you get the
Oh, boy.
salon. With the, okay. But
Don't make me get that snare drum out again.
But the church decides that just the way we're going to configure the books, putting the prophets last, right? Not where they were in Hebrew Bible, ending with prophets who look forward to something, and then Matthew who picks it right up. Even though Paul writes before Matthew's gospel, right? But we want to start with the story of Jesus and show how that's not an abolition of what has come before, but
fulfillment.
A fulfillment in a way that was really hard to believe.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
It was so much more than anyone thought, right? You know, if you're waiting for me to kick out the Romans, I'm sorry. How about I kick out death?
Yeah.
Okay. And until then, I'm going to make your suffering mean something. How's that for going all the way back to Adam and refreshing the plan of God, both in the world, but in every human heart too?
And the I guess that's one way of saying it too. And in many cases, a lot of the characters that are mentioned in the genealogy, and it's like, wow, he's coming from that line.
And Luke usually does have a prominent role for women, but it's only Matthew who will sort of interrupt this almost chant-like recitation of names to give you women who were spunky, women who were not always Jewish. Okay. You read about Tamar, and you're like, well, Tamar was married to two different guys who were sons of the father she ends up having kids with. And how did that happen? What's Judah thinking with all of this? But then you read the story and it's like, oh, Judah's trying to get rid of Tamar, and she's witty and resourceful, and she insists on being part of this family. And the same thing happens with Rahab and Ruth and Bathsheba and Mary too, and Jesus, right? Grafted in from the father to this family, and the women say, we can see something is happening here and we want in, right? And that's what all the nations kind of have to do in Matthew's gospel, is make that same sort of realization. God's plan is coming right through, and we want in.
Very cool.
Wow. And, of course, we hear the 12 days of Christmas, and we hear, Christmas doesn't start until the vigil on the 24th. It doesn't end. It doesn't end at his nativity or at Epiphany or at his presentation. What time frame are we looking at here?
Well, people will talk about the presentation as kind of the end of the beginning, but you usually go, in some countries, right, you have Immaculate Conception and Epiphany being an even bigger feast because it's Jesus sort of shown to the world. Okay, but yes, we really we get it exactly wrong. We should sort of really be getting ready for the 24th, but then going all the way through Epiphany at least. And so, if we've done it wrong, we should definitely go to confession in all seriousness, but then tell our bosses we have to be off until the day after the Epiphany.
It's still a holiday. It's
That's
still Christmas.
Right.
Yes,
That's right.
We're not allowed to do that on Catholic radio.
I don't think we are. But yes, and we sometimes forget that we still should be going to church on Holy Family, right? We don't want to forget Holy Family. Especially at Christmas, we're blessed, hopefully, with family. Sometimes by then, family gets on our nerves. And I bet almost everybody misses somebody in their family. Either they can't be together or they've already gone to the Lord. And Holy Family reminds us, guess what? We're going to see them again.
Yeah.
We end the year and start Advent. It's not the start of Advent, but Christ as King. No other king can say, guess what? The people you're missing this Christmas, when my kingdom comes completely, they'll be back.
Of course, in November we remember some holy souls, but we always remember my sister on Christmas because she was born on Christmas Day.
Okay, that's
and she
wonderful.
passed away several years ago. But it's like, well, first of all, how do you? You can find them, but it's tough to find a birthday/Christmas card.
Yes.
That's the, you know.
Did she ever feel like she got cheated out of presents?
Yeah, I think so. And frankly, I've cheated her.
Brothers will do that.
But it's great to come together as a family, and we know there's another person there that isn't there. You know what I mean?
Absolutely. Yeah. And yet they are there, not in a way that we'd like. You know, we want that sensate experience. But who is more of a model of faith than Mary? And I think we had a Bible Basics question on this about Mary in the tween years. Okay, she knows that she will see Joseph again. She knows better than anyone she will see Jesus again. But imagine Mary herself having that sense of longing after Jesus and Joseph are gone, before she can see them again, knowing better than anybody that she will. And so I think she's really with us when we think of people. Boy, I wish Mom were here this year. If we, God forbid, have lost a child or a sister, right? She kind of comforts us in a special way because she went through it, okay, until we do get to see them all again. And it's Advent and then Christ's return, right? And so we will get to see them again, and Mary knows better than anyone else what we're going through when we miss someone this time of year.
That's an excellent point, because this is probably above any other time of the year. This is probably the holiday that gets people the most that have just recently lost a loved one.
I know.
Or somebody that's actually had a loved one that's gone before many, many years, and it's an ongoing suffering, like you just mentioned. So this is a great point that you brought up.
And it's great when Christmas can be merry, but it always has to be meaningful. And I think when we think of what this is leading to, and everyone being together again, right? And Jesus and Mary and Joseph on the journey with us while we all get there together, then it's always going to be meaningful too.
Beautiful.
That is. And it really kind of brings everything full circle, because we get to take joy in each of these seasons, and this is like suddenly Super Bowl. I mean,
that's true.
Well, I guess Easter would be Super Bowl.
That's true. Maybe nowadays that's true.
We're filled with anticipation at this point, and that's a good thing. You know, sometimes it's not good to be anxious.
No,
but it's always good to anticipate and celebrate with joy when we arrive at that point.
If I can come back next year, I'm going to get the jokes in on you. Maybe I'll send them to Humpty.
We'll have you back. Yeah.
In the meantime, if you want to send a question for Bible Basics,
we love them,
for Professor Pete, feedback at annunciationradio.com.
Or just absolutely come up to Lourdes.
Yeah, there you go.
Yep.
There you go.
Cocoa, coffee, all the above.
I love it.
Yeah.
Peter Sibilio, I'll tell you, this half hour...
half hour, it seems like
it, yeah. It's always a great joy to have you in the studio with us. Thank you so much for your enlightenment.
My pleasure, treasure, and everybody's a treasure if you heard me say that.
Going to confession next week. Vinny Flynn with the 7 Secrets of Confession.
Hi, I'm Bev Koss. I'm from St. Joe's, Maumee, and you're listening to Annunciation Radio, Catholic radio for the Diocese of Toledo.
Annunciation Radio is giving you another way to access all of our great Catholic content. Now catch all of our live local programming on our YouTube and Facebook pages. Go into the studio during morning